Will you be allowed to drink caffeine? No alcohol or drug consumption. It gets really messy legally, and so there's certain states that don't have surrogacy-friendly laws. There's also something in there which was probably one of our biggest concerns with doing surrogacy. What is up, guys? Welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to talk all about surrogacy contracts. I want to talk about things that are important to include in your contracts, what the process of contracts looks like, and also a little insight behind how our journey or our process through contracts has been. So we have been in the process of contracts for about a little over 4 or 5 weeks now. It should have only taken like 3 weeks, but it's taken a little bit longer. And at the end of this episode, I'll share why it has taken longer. But first, I want to explain some things that you should include in your contracts. Now, I want to keep this pretty general because I have a lot of surrogates that follow us, but then we also have a lot of intended parents. And with the surrogacy contracts, you have things in there that are very important for a surrogate to add in, and then things also that are important for intended parents to have in. Now, I always say that contracts take about 4 to 6 weeks. Anything 6 weeks on, like 6 to 8 weeks, is a little bit longer, but maybe there's just things that need to be changed or added in, taken out. Anything prior to 4 weeks is very quick, especially if it's that 2 to 4 week mark. That's awesome. But generally around 4 to 6 weeks for both parties to review, both parties to make changes, and then things to get finalized. Now, at times contracts can be very long out and exhausting and draining, but it is such an important part of the journey because having things contractual and understood between both parties is so important. That way, when you go into the journey, you don't have to worry about anything. Everything's already been agreed on, prior to, talked about. Yeah, there may be some additions that you need to like talk through and work through, but for the most part, it's already in writing. That way, if you forget something or you need to refer back to something, it's there for you. So I'm going to talk about contracts in a very broad sense because everyone's journey is different. Everyone's details of what they're looking for or, you know, expect out of a journey is different, and also it's contractual, and so I can't give like personal details. But in a very broad sense, some of the things that are included in contracts are right away stating that you are psychologically and medically cleared for surrogacy, that you are deemed cleared by a medical professional to enter into a journey like this, whether as a surrogate or intended parents. Some of the other things stated are your representation, who's legally representing you, who's legally representing the intended parents, the escrow companies listed in there, the fertility clinic, any other medical professionals. I think my OB was listed in there, or projected hospitals in there, and clinic, so that all the pertinent, is that a word? Pertinent information is listed and everyone knows the parties involved. And then obviously it jumps into the journey itself. How many transfers are planned or expected? Usually I think it's about 3 transfers that they will try, and then I think at that point you can like do an amendment or something for further, but usually it's about 3 to try. How many embryos are you going to transfer? Is it going to be a single embryo, a double embryo? Are the embryos related to you as a traditional surrogate or as a gestational surrogate? They're not biologically related to you. The embryos don't include your egg. Stating who the embryos are, where the embryos are located, are they ready for transfer? And then once you transfer, what the IVF transfer process looks like. If you're on bed rest, what does that look like? If something happens to baby, or if the transfer doesn't take the first time, what's the next process? And then once you're pregnant, it talks about management of pregnancy. So making sure that you're not engaging in any activity that's going to be harmful to you or the baby. Will you be allowed to drink caffeine? No alcohol or drug consumption. Pretty standard things that you should agree not to do with being pregnant with your own children, let alone someone else's child. And then there's always a clause about travel in there. When can you travel? When can you not? Where can you go? Where can you not? Because there's certain states that are not surrogacy friendly, meaning that if you go there close to delivery, you deliver in this state, the baby is biologically yours, and the intended parents would then have to adopt the baby from you. It gets really messy legally, and so there's certain states that don't have surrogacy friendly laws, and so you can't travel to those. Generally, I want to say you can travel up until like 32 weeks, or depending on what contract state or what you guys are okay with and what your OB will clear you for restriction wise. But travel, when can you travel, when can you not? And then a big thing is communication. How will communication look between you and the intended parents? Some IP and surrogate relationships, they only talk for appointments, or they talk once a month, or they're in a different country and they only talk via email. And so stating that you will keep in touch with them, that your communication will be what the other party is expecting, and you guys agree on that. Will you let them come to appointments? Will you Skype with them? Just clearly stating how that relationship would work. And the same goes for delivery. Who will be in the room for delivery, whether it's an emergency C-section, who will be your one support person? If it's, you know, standard vaginal delivery, who are you allowing in the room? Do you just want your support person? Are you okay with intended parents? Clearly stating ahead of time. Yes, you'll do the birth plan prior to delivery, but this is just ahead of time making it clear, hey, this is what we've talked about, this is what we're expecting, this is what we're planning for. And then after baby's born, you know, there's gonna be parentage rights. So in the contracts, it states parentage orders, who is the birth parents. You waive your rights that you are not legally the parents of the child. There's a pre-birth order or a birth order that you guys will put into effect to sign over rights of who the baby goes to and who the baby is not related to. And then there's a lot of what ifs that are talked about in contracts. What if something happens to the surrogate? Who will be her power of attorney? What if this happens, then what's the effect? Just to cover all bases so that, again, you know ahead of time how things would play out. There's also clauses in there for termination or reduction, should that be something that you guys agree on. If you agree on termination, what does that look like? If you don't, clearly stating that. Selective reduction, clearly stating yes or no. There's also something in there which was probably one of our biggest concerns with doing surrogacy, was the custody of the child. So should something happen to the intended parents, let's say they got a divorce prior to transfer, or something happened and they both lost their life, where would the baby go to? Would the baby be ours or would the baby go to someone else? And so in contracts it states who would baby go to should something happen, who would be the next guardian, and then in a sense additional to that, what if something happened there, then where would baby go? Just to clearly state that baby is not ours and baby has somewhere to go. And then there's something in there about breast milk, should the surrogate desire to pump and the intended parents would like her breast milk for the baby. How will she be compensated? How much? For how often? How will the breast milk be sent over or transferred? And yeah, just agreeing if that's something you guys are wanting to do. And then probably the biggest thing, which is the hardest thing, or like I feel like sometimes the most awkward thing to talk about, is the financial side of it, but it's so important that it's in contracts and in writing. That way if you forget or you have a question, you can always refer back to it and know, okay, this is what I'm compensated, or oh, this is what I'm being reimbursed, or oh, actually I'm covering this charge, just so that everyone knows ahead of time. And things like the base compensation. What is the base compensation? How is that compensation being broken up? In what monthly payments? When does it start? When does it end? Like reimbursements, are you getting reimbursed for medical expenses, for your medical co-pays or your prescription co-pays? Who is responsible for paying for what? So is there things that as a surrogate I'm covering, or is there things the intended parents are covering, or both? Who's paying for? Is it coming from the escrow company? Is it coming straight from the intended parents, or is it coming out of my pocket and then I'm getting reimbursed? Just talking about anything and everything financially. Compensation, insurance coverage, medical co-pays, travel expenses, travel stays, everything. Also a big thing to talk about in contracts, which is kind of those like fluke things that happens, which I feel like I've heard about it maybe twice. Let's say surrogate delivers a baby and the baby is not the intended parents. It was not the baby that was conceived through IVF, and something happened, some malpractice, surrogate did not do her due diligence to abstain or something. In contracts it states, as a surrogate you do anything to cause something like that to happen, you are responsible for XYZ, which is just a little bit of accountability. Hey, you need to do your due diligence and abstain during certain times, use protection, be smart about your choices and your decisions, because this is life you're dealing with and a lot of financial commitment on the intended parent's part. And then this is kind of newer, but a clause about social media. And I feel like this is an important thing to talk about because we share our journey online, and a lot of you will message me and say, hey, we've just matched for a journey, we would love to share online. How do I go about mentioning that to our intended parents, or vice versa to our surrogate? And I definitely think it's something you have to talk about prior to contracts. Don't let contracts be the first time you bring something up about wanting to share online. That was so important to us upon every time that we've matched in all of our journeys. Hey, we share our life online. Are you okay with us sharing parts of the journey online, whether we share details about you or not? Are you okay with that? And we wanted to get that yes every single time, so that we knew that, okay, we were protected, we had their verbal agreement, and then in contracts it was in writing again. But you want to state, like, what are you hoping to share? Why do you want to share? Like, you know, we want to, one, we just share our life and we want to share that side of things, but also we want to give insight to those on their own journey and encourage them and pray for them on their own journey. And we want to give insight on what does a surrogacy journey look like from start to finish, from matching all the way through to delivery, the shots, the medical screening, the pregnancy symptoms, and, you know, hormone symptoms. Like, we wanted to document all of that. And just because you share that side of the journey doesn't mean you have to share important details about the intended parents. Some intended parents want to stay anonymous and don't want to be known or named, and that is totally fine. But all of that needs to be in writing. You know, what are you allowed to share? What are you not allowed to share? Do the intended parents want to be involved in sharing, or do they not? And just clearly having that understanding prior to going into a journey where you are sharing online, but absolutely before going into contracts. And then a part of all contracts, I think ours was like 48 pages or whatever, is a bunch of legal wording and therefore and furthermore and like all the verbiage that is legal garbage, but it has to be in there. It's full of that. But above all, the contracts are just there to protect you as the surrogate, or to protect you as the intended parent, and to help for a smooth transition or smooth journey. And so in general, the process of contracts will look like this. The intended parent's attorney will work up a contract, a draft. They will review it, make additions, make changes, revisions. They will send it off to the surrogate's attorney. They will review it separately and then together. And then if they have any additions, revisions, or anything, they will make those changes. They'll send it back, and you go back and forth as many times as it needs. Sometimes you don't have to, or sometimes it's a lot. Sometimes it's just rewording. Sometimes it's clauses that need to be taken out and clauses that need to be put in and major changes. But it can go quick or it can go really slow. My biggest piece of advice is you are your own advocate. Your attorneys have an obligation to you as their client. You're paying for them, or your intended parent is paying for them. And it is their duty to serve you and to be there for you in a timely manner. They have clients that they're dealing with too, but I'm an over communicator, and so I love just staying on top of things. And if I don't hear any communication for a couple days, I send an email. Hey, did you get my email? Where are you at with things? Hey, I haven't heard anything back from you. Were you able to send that to the intended parent's attorney? Did she get back to you yet? If not, can you follow up with her? Because I just like to keep the ball rolling, or else you just sit there and wait for as long as it takes for them to get back to you, which I'm not about. Not that like I'm rushing things, but I just like the ball to keep moving, and it just places a little bit of accountability, like, hey, I'm attentive to this. I'm making sure things are getting progressed. Did you get my email? If so, awesome. Can you let me know what you thought? I just think it's really important. So whether as a surrogate or as intended parents, keep in touch with your attorney, and make sure that they're keeping in touch with you. And side note, just want to mention, some of you guys are like, where do I find an attorney to represent me? A lot of times your surrogacy agency will refer you somewhere. Your fertility clinic should also have referrals as well. I feel like option C is like Google surrogacy attorneys near you to find someone in your state that can represent you. Guess what news I just got? First off, I'm eating Oreos, so no judgment. There is Oreos in my teeth. But Kinsey texted me and they just got the first draft of the contract. This is the best part to get to because you feel like it's literally happening, but it's also the worst part because it takes a while. It takes like 4 to 6, probably sometimes 8 weeks. I feel like last journey it was, I think, that 6-week mark. Maybe it was 4, who knows? I don't know. It takes a while, several weeks, but they got it. She's like, we're heading to the gym and they're gonna come home and cook dinner and then we're gonna sit down and read through it. So once they read through, they're basically gonna make any marks if they have any changes or questions. They will meet with their attorney and then their attorney will send our attorney another draft or whatever for our attorney to read and then for us to go through. Oh my gosh, I can't wait, I'm so excited. Also, guess what today is? Day 1 of birth control. I'm not even mad to be on it anymore because it didn't affect my lining this last time, and I'm kind of excited to be on it because I've been on my period for 3 days now and it is super heavy, and I've actually had cramps, which I haven't for a while. Probably for a couple years now I haven't had cramps, and so I'm ready to just be done with it. So crazy, but not excited that I'm on birth control. And I will stay on birth control throughout contracts. That just helps regulate my cycle, keeps me on track. That way, whenever contracts get done, whenever transfer happens, everything is kind of planned out where they can just tell me when to stop, when to start different medication, like when to start estrogen, and be prepared for transfer. So yay for being on birth control for several weeks. All right, we are here in Florida and I just got the best news today that we got our portion of the contracts from our attorney. Super excited. So now starts the process of us reading through it, writing down any questions, any concerns, and then we'll meet with our attorney. All right, we are on the road heading back to Missouri from Florida. It was such a good trip. Got to introduce Kinsey and Jake to my family and we got to hang out with their family again, stay with them. It was a blast. On the drive back, we are going to read through the contract because we got it from our attorney, and we were having so much fun that we just haven't had time to look it over. So we're gonna read through, I think it's like 40 pages, and then we have a call later today with our attorney. Yay, it's getting official. So over the weekend, we got our contract revisions from our attorney. I looked them over and everything looked good. So this morning, Monday, August 28th, our attorney sent it over to our intended parents attorney for them to look over. Unfortunately, our attorney had a loss in the family, so she'll be out of office until Thursday. But Kinsey just texted me and said they got the contract. So that means her attorney sent it over to them. So they're gonna look over the revisions. There was a lot of like wording that my attorney wanted to edit, and then one other small change that she wanted to add. It shouldn't be much to look over on their end. Should all be good, but that means that progress is being made. But what the holdup was with ours was a very simple misunderstanding. Our attorney did have a family emergency, so for a week she was out of office, rightfully so. Recently, just one misunderstanding from one of the attorneys that should not have been a misunderstanding. It's already signed off through our agency of understanding. Our intended parents already have this understanding. We have this understanding. It was just that one of the attorneys wasn't fully understanding it and just needed extra clarification, which unfortunately was happening through email. So an email would be sent, and then a few days would go by, and then another email would be sent, and then a few days go by, and another email. And I'm like, can we just make a phone call? Like, I wish that two attorneys, intended parents, surrogate, and surrogate spouse could all sit together. Heck, even the agency, let's just throw them in the call. All of us could sit together on one phone call for like 4 hours and just be done. Like, is that possible? It could be a one-day thing, but I know the likelihood of that happening is not very likely because sometimes contracts are very easy and there's just like 1 or 2 changes that need to be made, you're good to go. But then sometimes there's a lot of back and forth you have to go to, and it is kind of awkward, and you're like, hey, actually they stated this, but it actually needs to be this, or oh, they told me this at first and now they're saying this in contract, so we need to reword that. Like, sometimes it can be awkward, sometimes it could be like, you know, feel invasive, the contracts can. So I know like one phone call isn't gonna solve it or be what everyone needs. But anyways, with ours, I believe after today, it is September 12th, with one more phone call and email, attorneys would be good. All understood, everything will make sense, and we can sign off on this. So I'm hoping to keep you updated, and the next video on here will be celebratory that we are official, contracts are getting signed, and we are moving to transfer. Again, I want to clearly state that with our intended parents, we talked through so much prior to getting to this point, even at matching several hours of what we hope and what we're looking for in a journey and what they're looking for in a journey, and really seeing if we match. Just with a little falling out we had with our last journey, our last intended parents, we didn't want that to happen again, and we wanted to clearly communicate our expectations, our hopes, and we wanted to make sure that they reciprocated that and they were the best match for us. And so all of the big major decisions we had talked about, we had agreed upon, we were on the same page about. All right, just got the best news. Got an email from my attorney that the intended parents attorney sent over the final rewording for my approval. I approved it, everything is good. So we are done. Oh my gosh, so I verbally approved it, and so I believe the intended parents attorney is now sending it to them for signatures. After they sign it, we will sign it, and I cannot wait to close the door on this chapter.